Hey guys, it's Darwin here with my weekly Q&A to answer more of your questions. If you want to ask a question for next week's Q&A, you can either leave it in the comment box below or send me a video question over to darwinonthetrail@yahoo.com, and then next week I'll answer as many as I possibly can. Alright, so let's go ahead and get into this week's first question. How do you feel about bivvies or ground sleeping with just a sleep mat and sleeping bag? So, good question, and believe it or not, actually last night I slept in a bivvy. In the past, I've actually been not a big fan of bivvies, but I figured I would finally give one a try since I finally found one that I think that I like. So I actually picked up an Enlightened Equipment Recon bivvy, and last night I took it out, slept in it, and I'm actually really digging it. So the Recon bivvy is actually what I'm going to be using for my section of the Arizona Trail at the end of this week. I'm gonna go out for 10 days, try to put down about 200 miles, and I'm carrying a bivvy and a tarp setup. So some nights I'll use the bivvy, and then other nights I'll actually just throw my pad on the ground and cowboy camp, as you were asking about. So I'm typically a tent guy, but lately I've just been trying to get a little more minimal on smaller trips like that. So I'm giving it a try now, but yeah, last night I slept in a bivvy. Do you have any podcasts that you listen to or suggest to hikers to listen to while on the trail? So I used to not be a big podcast fan. I used to just listen to music, and in about the last year I finally started picking up on some podcasts. So I don't always listen to hiker specific podcasts. Some of my favorite ones are Fat Man on Batman with Kevin Smith. I'm a big Batman geek, so I love listening to him rant about comic books and stuff. There's a podcast called The Art of Manliness that I like to listen to because they talk about really historical things with Teddy Roosevelt, John Muir, and some certain men in our history that have kind of helped influence nature and stuff. And then the hiking specific podcasts that I listen to are obviously Pox and Puss, which is a very popular AT podcast, but they haven't put one out in quite a while. The Trail Show, which isn't too bad. Sometimes I really can't take those guys. They talk a little bit too much for me and not really trail specific. And then the podcast that I've really gotten into lately, there's another YouTube hiker named John Z, and a couple months ago he actually started a podcast called Routes. Now John's podcast is completely different because he doesn't really talk about the major trails. He talks to hikers that are setting their own routes and planning their own through hikes that no one's ever done. So it's a super interesting podcast. I definitely suggest checking that one out. He only has a couple of episodes, and right now I think he's only putting out about one a month, but definitely worth checking out. Super interesting podcast. Aside from that, there are a lot of different trail and hiking podcasts. Just kind of search through your thing, and I'm sure you'll find a lot of them.
Hey Darwin, Josh from New Hampshire here, doing a section hike of the Carter-Mariah Trail and the Wildcat Ridge Trail. There's Mount Washington in the background. Love your videos, keep up the good work. Question for you is, do you swap out your insoles? I bought a pair of the Ultra Lone Peak 3.5s, absolutely love them. Did 14 miles in them yesterday as a first hike. Just wondering if you swapped them out for a little bit more arch support, or if that's something you would recommend. Normally I put super feet in my rugby cleats and whatnot. I didn't know if that would be a good insole to put in these shoes. Thanks for taking my question, and keep up the good work. Like I said earlier, love your videos.
Oh man, that hike looks great. I really miss the White Mountains, so have fun up there. Yeah, so in answer to your question, I do swap out my insoles. So I actually use the Superfeet Flex. I don't like the typical Superfeet because I think that they're a little too stiff and they give a little bit too much arch support like the green ones, but I've been using these for a couple years now and I really dig them. They're just a little bit of extra support, but they're not overkill, which is why I like them a lot. I've never been one to use the insole that comes in a shoe, whether it be the Ultras or a Merrell or a running shoe or anything. They never work for me, so I always use something else like the Superfeet Flex. By now, I imagine you're pretty good at guessing pounds and ounces. How much do you think that awesome beard weighs in at? It weighs nothing. How do you store your food while hiking in the desert since there isn't always a tree to hang food from? That's a great question, Gabby, and one that I've actually recently had to really think of because I'm about to head out and do this section of the Arizona Trail. So typically any of the sections that I've ever done in the desert, I've just taken my bear bag, my Z-Packs bear bag, and I've taken it away from my tent and tried to hang it in some sort of a bush or something like that. Every once in a while I'll take it and put it in my vestibule, and I haven't had any problems. But lately, as you might know, I've decided to go stoveless, so I'm carrying food that's not necessarily being cooked at camp, so it's not emitting as much smell. So recently I picked up what's called an OP sack, which stands for odor-proof sack. It's essentially this really big Ziploc bag, and now I'm putting all of my food in here, rolling it up and just putting it right outside of my tent or my bivvy or whatever, and I haven't had any problems yet. Now, I'm still one of those hikers that's always on the fence, and I rather hang a bear bag, but you have those situations when you're in the desert and you can't really do it, so you just kind of have to risk that. Now, I try not to put it inside of my tent, because just in case there is a mouse or a squirrel or something, they're not gonna eat a hole in my tent to get to my bag. So as long as I set it right outside, if something is going to get my food, they won't destroy my gear. And I'll eventually do a full review on the OP sack and let you guys know what my final thoughts are on using this for a bunch of miles, but so far I've really been digging it.
So I took a vacation up to Michigan's Upper Peninsula recently, and I'm from the Lower Peninsula around the Detroit area, and I noticed when I was up there, like, we did mostly driving around just to like different locations, and I noticed that the NCT went through like the most beautiful parts of the vacation that we took. And you know, I've just recently like started getting into hiking, and I want to start going on longer hikes. I haven't did anything over 10 miles yet, so I don't really know what to expect, you know, doing a longer hike. And I was wondering if you have even thought about doing the NCT or have done a section of it, since I remember watching one of your videos, you said you were from, I think, Indiana. And I mean, that's not too far off of, you know, where Michigan's at. Or maybe you know someone who's done the NCT and what to expect.
So, good question, and I have personally never done the North Country Trail. I know a handful of cats that have. From what I understand, it can be kind of a challenging trail in some sections. Now, as far as planning for a through hike of it or anything like that, my suggestion would be maybe looking into some references like whiteblaze.net, even though that is a website for the Appalachian Trail. If you go into the forum, there's actually a section that has a little breakdown of each long distance trail. So you can find stuff on the Ice Age Trail, you can find stuff on the Arizona Trail, you can find stuff on the North Country Trail, and get some references there. Aside from that, I don't really have any information on that one. I've never done a lot of research on the North Country Trail. Even though I lived in Indiana, I just never got up that way. I'm sure you can also find some Facebook groups for the North Country Trail of people that are going out to either hike sections or doing a full through hike. But really, my suggestion with any trail is always do a little bit of research, find out where you can get on, where you can get off, get your gear ready, and just get out on the trail and discover it yourself. Discover it through trial and error. That's always the best way. If you were doing the AT again, would you use your Z-Packs bag or your Osprey? And how big, if at all? Was your comfort trade-off between the two packs? So if I was going to do the AT again, I actually wouldn't use my Osprey Atmos 65. I wouldn't use my Z-Packs Arc Blast. I would actually use my new pack that I just got, which is the Z-Packs Nero. It is a very ultralight pack where you're gonna be rocking about 5 to 7 pounds as your base weight. That's the pack I would take if I was doing another AT hike. The reason is because I've done the AT and I know kind of the ins and outs of how to do the AT, how fast I can do the AT, what sections I can do bigger miles on, the towns to resupply in. I would actually take a much, much, much lighter kit. I think once you've done a trail for the first time and you kind of know it and you know what to expect and you know what your comfort levels can be, I think that you can do it much lighter, much faster, and just in a completely different way. Plus, I would like to redo that trail and do it ultra light, do it a lot faster and do bigger days, because now I know that I can handle that. So yeah, if I was gonna go out and re-hike it, I would be carrying my Nero pack. I'd probably be carrying a tarp setup, I'd be going stoveless, and I would carry barely any water storage just because I know that I can hydrate really easy all the way along that trail. Now that's not for everyone, and that's not good advice for someone that's gonna go out and hike it for the first time, but I think that if you know your comfort levels and you end up really knowing that trail, I think you can do it completely different. So that's what I would take. All right guys, last question of the week. Can you name 5 people that inspire you on the trail and off? Teddy Roosevelt, my grandmother, my through hiking buddy Knott's, because that dude is a super inspiration. Tons of trail miles on that guy. Any national park or national forest ranger, that is the coolest job you can have, and I have a ton of respect for those people and my entire family for reasons that you guys wouldn't even expect. All right guys, so if you want to leave a question for next week's Q&A, you can either leave it in the comment box below or send me a video question over to darwinonthetrail@yahoo.com, and then next week I'll answer as many as I possibly can. So at the end of this week on Saturday, I'll be hitting the Arizona Trail and doing about 100 to 200 mile section. I'm going out for 10 days, so it all depends on how many miles I can put in 10 days. I'm shooting for 200. I'm gonna start just south of Flagstaff and head south. So we'll see how many miles I put down. Aside from that, Snuggles and I have about 2 more weeks that we're gonna be here in Flagstaff, and then we're gonna be hitting the road and heading out to Southern California to Joshua Tree National Park. If you haven't had a chance yet, go over and check me out on Instagram. I've been posting a lot of new photos lately of some of the things that Snuggles and I have going on throughout the week, plus some pictures from some past hikes. If you found any value in this video, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and as always guys, thanks for watching.